Welcome to the Black Magic Woman podcast with Mundanara Bales.
Welcome to part 2 of the Garma special.
Can you please introduce yourself to my listeners and viewers and just share with us what brings you here to Garma?
I am Kilsley Kaji Sting. It's my Haida name. I am Miles Richardson. I come here from Haida Gwaii, the homeland of my people, which is an island archipelago, an island Indigenous people off the coast of Canada, the northeast Pacific, off the west coast of Canada. Our northern shore is 40 miles from Alaska's southern shore, and in fact, half of the population of our nation, 5,000 citizens, are not only Haida citizens, they're American citizens, and 5,000 of us are on the Canadian side. I have been a political leader for my people. It's called the President of the Council of the Haida Nation, which is our nation's primary federal governing institution. I have worked with the province of British Columbia, the government of Canada, and interested First Nations in British Columbia to design and build and put into operation a treaty process, a modern treaty-making process in British Columbia. And as Australia embarks on their process of reconciliation, I was invited to come here and share our story, the story of the Haida Nation, the story of Canada and British Columbia in our pursuit of reconciliation, sometimes through treaty, sometimes not, and report on our successes, but mostly on our attempts at moving forward and our sometimes spectacular failures, and on the state of where we are in developing a functional, productive, and acceptable relationship between ourselves as Indigenous peoples and Canada. So that's why I'm here, and I was happy to get the invitation, and I've been really treated and well by the people here.
I was just going to say, you're a long way from home. In terms of being here amongst the Gumatj people, but also there's everyday Australians, there's politicians here, the Prime Minister's been here, and then you've just got the local people. There's all these different people that are here. What have been some of the highlights or some of the conversations that you've had?
Well, the highlight was to come into these lands and be greeted by the Gumatj people and their leaders, and very graciously and very, very lovingly, I'd say, and to come here in a safe and comfortable environment and present our story, but really importantly to me, to listen and to share stories with other people, other Indigenous, Aboriginal people of Australia, mainstream Australians who have similar concerns, and a lot of different people just sharing their stories and looking for solutions and looking in a really profound way of what we need to do to get along. Mm-hmm. I think that we all accept in this day and age that we're all here to stay, that our governing and societal institutions don't really reflect sufficiently who we are and the basis of what these relationships could be, and we're looking for ways of fixing those.
And I love the fact that you're talking about relationships, because there's one thing that I know that we need to do is that we need to start with that relationship in this country between us as First Nations people and also, everyday Australians. There's an opportunity here, especially with the new Prime Minister, with Albanese committing to recognise us in the Constitution, to also commit to a referendum, which then hopefully gives us a voice to Parliament that will hopefully lead to either truth-telling outside of Victoria, because we know what's already happening. But a treaty is an agreement. And it's an agreement that we don't have an agreement. And in fact, Australia is the only English-speaking common law country in the world that still doesn't have an agreement with the First Nations peoples. So there's a lot for everyday Australians to think about, and especially for people that come to Garma, there's a lot that people are going to take away with them. What are you going to take back to your country, to your people?
Well, one thing that we share in common is we have we're both Commonwealth countries. We share, if you will, a common colonial occupier, the remnants of British authority. In our place, it's Canada, and here it's Australia. And it's so obvious to me, like Canada has mouthed the words of recognition of who we are, put in Canada's constitution, a recognition and affirmation of our fundamental human rights and our continuing place in our homelands, our continuing ancient title. And the courts, this happened in 1982, and the courts since then have affirmed that decision and fleshed them out in circumstances that were brought before it. But it hasn't amounted to a hill of beans in terms of really fundamentally changing our lives and our control over our destinies as peoples. And when I look at Australia, I was here in 1996 at the Fourth Reconciliation Conference in Melbourne, and one thing that I was slapped me in the face there was how there was zero trust in Australia. The High Courts of Australia had just come down with the Wick decision, which basically said that Aboriginal rights are supersede cattle grazing rights, which is apparently a big deal in Australia. And the Prime Minister stood before that conference, and on the stage he had his governing caucus, he had the opposition, and he had the Governor General, all with him on the stage when he stood up and said to the Aboriginal people, "The legal pendulum has swung too far in your favor," he said in 1996. He said, "For your own good, I'm going to legislate them back." I thought, wow, is this possible? Like in Canada, or at least our Constitution doesn't allow someone to legislate something that the courts have established. And I thought, wow, there's no trust here. How can anybody even be wasting time coming to talk reconciliation in this situation?
That's exactly it.
And now I come here this year, and the government, the Prime Minister,
20-something years later,
the same office, the Prime Minister is coming here and saying, I'm going to put to the people of Australia a voice, a provision in our Constitution to recognize your right to state what you believe, your right to educate us on who you are. It's a small step, but it could be a beginning if there was trust there, if there was seriousness.
It could have happened 30 years ago as well.
Yeah, when I heard his statement, I thought, my first reaction was, I've heard this all before, And then I thought, but there's an opportunity here.
Of course.
Maybe the Prime Minister means it. Maybe the Prime Minister has the political acumen to be able to lead this country to adopt the first step on constitutional reform. And we should all put our energy and give it a chance, because it has to happen.
Yeah. And if it doesn't happen now, then when?
And one thing I had the opportunity to say to the Aboriginal people of Australia is the things that they're talking about constitutionalizing. Your inherent title to your lands and territories, your right to self-determination, to determine your future, are in your hands, Aboriginal people. They come from your sovereignty, from the fact that you have owned and controlled and lived
And
in
managed
your
and ran.
territories and all that stuff since time immemorial. That's where they come from. And the only people who can remove them from you is you with your full and informed consent. And if you don't make that decision, and it's up to you, can never be removed. And life will go on. You know, it may be tough. It'll be missed opportunities. But think of the potential here of going forward. Yet 2 days ago, I heard Gomach elder Ja Piri with the most eloquent characterization of potential and what's possible. She said, just imagine if we could put together my people's way of knowing with your people's way of knowing, the Western society's science-based and the deep Indigenous Aboriginal culture of Australia. She said, if we could bring together our two ways of knowing, we would create magic. And how did she put it? We would have a happy future, a happy life together. What a beautiful image that is. What a beautiful vision. I've never heard it put more eloquently.
And see, that's the magic, I guess, when you have elders and people with lived experience, I'm not just going to say knowledge and wisdom, but with lived experience of growing up in a Western society, but very much strong in their culture and their language.
Absolutely knowing who they are.
She knows who she is.
They know who she is.
And we've been living in this Western world, and we can see the only way forward is bringing them both together. We know the Western world's not going to go away. We know the governments are not just going to go. We know people are not going to get on their boats and go back to.
Definitely.
So, how do you bring these two worlds closer together?
That's our challenge.
I do. That's exactly what I do in
you know,
my
and
day job.
At the Supreme Court in Canada, one of the judges in one of the big decisions, the Delgamuth decision, he ended his decision with these words. He said that when he talked about the Aboriginal title and its challenge of implementing it in Canada, he said, let's face it, we're all here to stay. Just basically meaning let's just face that fact. Nobody's trying to kick anybody out. Nobody's, they're trying to snuff out Indigenous people is no longer an option. Let's just accept we're all here to stay and figure out how to get along, live in harmony.
And that's what I would say. If everyday Australians knew their history, which is Australian history, it's not Aboriginal history. Colonialism happened, and a lot of horrible things have happened.
That's the way to look at it, that it's Australian history,
It's Australian
and it has
history,
to be a
and it
part
has
of
to be-
everything that happens here.
And that's what's missing.
And be proud of it.
Exactly.
Make it part of you.
And also acknowledge, not just the colonial history, because that's where it starts when you go to school here. It starts with the colonial history. Not the
That
tens
is
of thousands
so
of years.
wrong.
I know.
That's
why.
I want to use nice words, and that's a mischaracterization of history if there ever was one.
And you know what? It's probably the same story in a lot of other colonized
It's
countries.
exactly the same in
where it's
many.
the colonizers who impose their story, their view, their language, their culture onto us as First Nations. And now there's an opportunity, and I'm going to stick to this as we wrap up. There's an opportunity for us as everyday Australians, and in particular for us as First Nations people. There's an opportunity to work with the Prime Minister, to work with Annie Linda Burney, which is our Indigenous Affairs Minister. We've got really good people in these positions now. I think all the cards are starting to line up. But there's still, 27 million other people that we need to support us and to walk with us. So that's probably my biggest thing here, is that Garma, for a lot of non-Indigenous people, they're immersing themselves in our culture, and they leave here hopefully with, something, whether it's fire in their belly or they feel like they need to do something. And those are the conversations I'm having. People walk away and they go, you know what, now I know when I go back to my organisation, I know why we've got a reconciliation action plan, and I know why that we're investing and coming to Garma. But there's more than just coming to Garma. They can experience Garma in their local areas where they live or where they work. Mm-hmm. So when you go back to your country, what's probably one of the stories you're going to share with your family?
I'm going to tell them about the beautiful people and cultures that continue to flourish in Australia.
Despite all the odds against us.
In this wonderful part of the world. And tell them that there are people like us, people who have thrived, have developed cultures and ways of being, ways of living, the equal of any in the history of this humankind throughout history. Beautiful cultures who've faced the same colonial oppression forces that our people have and have come through it knowing who they are, insisting on being recognized and respected for who they are, and still willing to go forward arm in arm in brotherhood as humans.
Oh, stop. I just feel like I'm wearing the right shirt today.
you know, another thing that as Australians go through this journey, one thing that makes our people who we are, and one reason I know one reason that why I can still be here as a living generation of my nation, of the Haida Nation, is because our people distill their understandings of the truth and put that into our ways of being, our ways of living. That's called culture. We practice that, but when we do, we lead with ceremony.
Of course.
And all proper ceremony does, it reminds each of us that we're all in this together. We're all in this together as human beings and with the rest of creation. Mm-hmm. Everything is connected. Yeah. Everything is interdependent. That's what our cultures teach. That's what Australian Aboriginal culture teaches us. That's what Haida culture teaches us. Yeah. The rest of the world needs some of that.
Of course they do. And Australians in this country can be part of the oldest living continuous culture in world history. They can be part of it. And a lot of them don't know where to start. So by listening to this podcast, I hope people feel more kind of informed, educated, motivated, inspired to actually do something instead of doing nothing.
The other day I heard the President of the United States on the TV, and he was declaring an emergency due to climate change and biodiversity loss, that we're facing an existential threat as a human species. How are we going to get out of it? You know, when you look at that question, you got to ask yourself, why are our Indigenous people still here after thousands of years, tens of thousands of years? Our ancestors, and in the distilled wisdom of our cultures, understood something that humanity today needs.
Of course.
And if we're not going to solve these existential threats to humankind without realizing that we're all interdependent and we're all in this together.
Of course.
So wake up, people.
Wake
Smell
up.
the coffee.
And I love it. I'm going to leave with the theme here at Garma is look towards the future. And that's what's so important, is that I guess when I think about our future generations are entitled to a healthy planet, to clean water and to clean air. And it's each and every one of us in terms of our responsibility and obligation to ensure that that happens. So thank you so much.
My grandmother speaks to me.
Well, after a couple of moments of bumping into you, true story, you asked me, I think Thursday, or was it Friday?
One of the days.
One of the days. I'm lost with the days. And you said, where did you get that bag from? And now that bag is your bag. And it was a Black Magic Woman bag. So from that moment, Then I needed some support. And look, we're sitting here on this beautiful balcony here on the land of the Gumatj peoples at the Garma festival. Sis, can you please introduce yourself to my listeners, but also now viewers on our YouTube channel? Tell us your name and, you can do your white fella introduction, or you can do your black fella, or do both.
Okay, so my name is Sasha Greenoff. My skin name is Nawana. I'm a Jari woman from the Kimberley region of the East Kimberley region in Halls Creek. That's from my grandmother's side, and my grandfather's side is from the Jawan tribe of the Katherine region. And I was raised in Darwin in the Northern Territory. I also grew up with Daniel Busher, who was speaking previously, on Warramunga country, where I spent all of my high school years there. I currently live in Perth, and I've been living there on Noongar country for 5 years.
Too deadly. And then, sis, what brings you to Garma?
So I work for Aboriginal Legal Service of Western Australia. I'm the team leader for the Youth Engagement Program for the Perth Metro and the Adult Bail Support Program for the Perth Metro, and I also team lead the Youth Engagement Program and the Adult Bail Support Program in the Kimberley region.
Wow.
So this is my break from work, and I'm contracted by the Yotha Yindi Foundation to work as the coordinator for the VIP and corporates.
And you've done such a deadly job, because I have come here to Respens Media and Corporate. I've come with the AGL mob, and you've done an amazing job. Thank you so much for looking after us last night. The dinner was amazing. The experience has been amazing. What are you going to take away from being here? What's your biggest takeaways?
Oh, I don't have a biggest takeaway. Everything.
Everything.
Every day there's been something. And I guess coming out here days before to set up, and then experiencing the magic, the conversations, the friendships and the networking that takes place before my eyes. That's why I come out here to work to set up big things for big changes.
And big changes, I feel, are on the horizon.
Yes, definitely.
And I would say, in terms of just meeting you, sis,
yeah,
like that's one of the things I'm going to take away. When you say those conversations, the connections and relationships, I can't wait. And I know this is your first time on a podcast, but I need to get you back on, because you're doing some important work in your community for our people. Yes. And I do other work as well. This is my side hustle. So I'd love to get you back on the program and talk about, and even not just the work that you do, but I'd love to hear your experiences of growing up in Alice Springs and Darwin. They're places that I visited. I haven't been Alice Springs yet. Heard a lot about Alice Springs, but just like literally in a couple of weeks, I'll be off to Uluru for my very first time. Oh. So I'll probably fly into Alice Springs and then head to the beautiful Rock. When you leave this country and you go back home, maybe what are some of the things that you're going to share with your family about the Garma festival?
I guess the friendships that I've made, and I guess the big announcement that happened here, the ceremony, being in women's healing space, watching the bunggul dances and actually dancing on the bunggul myself. And I guess just going back with a different perspective of the outside world from here. So when you're at Gukala, you're in this bubble of not knowing the time, not knowing anything.
Yeah. Reception,
like,
internet, phones,
nothing.
No watches.
It's just, and then I think back to our elders that came before us. This is how they used to live.
Yeah.
And so going back, my spirit will be more grounded.
And I'm like, there's so many goosebump moments where I just feel it, sis, in terms of your spirit being much more grounded. I'm going to go home to 5 kids. So I better take this opportunity to actually do a big shout out to Tiger Lily, Jida, Lameki, Kasara and Garland, and my husband Peace, holding it down at home. I've been here for the last 4 days in Adelaide for 2 days, so I haven't been home for nearly a week. So tomorrow I will be home, but they'll be watching this and hoping that Mum actually remembers that I've got kids at home to get home to. But I can't wait to get home to my kids, but I'm going back with definitely a renewed outlook on life, but my spirit, I feel strong. I feel this sense of, there's good things that are going to happen, and there's some really deadly people that are making things happen.
Yeah, definitely.
So I don't know. Sometimes I even feel when I'm talking to people like I don't even have anything left to say.
Yeah.
There's been so much talking that I just feel like now I just need to sit and just be, and that's what I'm going to do now at the bunggul grounds. So
Yeah, that's what I can't wait to do as well.
well, let's go and do it together.
Yes, well, lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me on here. And yes, I'll look forward to, and I know that our friendship will always be now.
Sis, and really quickly, that necklace that you're wearing, that jade,
Yes.
love it. And
Thank you.
we're going to come back and you're going to share how the High Commissioner of New Zealand gifted you that beautiful necklace. So
Yes.
we didn't have time to talk today, but we will have
Yes.
more time later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, welcome to my office for the afternoon here on the beautiful lands, and just absolute magical lands after the day I've had and the 4 days that I've had, but today in particular. I'm not going to go too much into it because it was just absolutely beautiful to share it with beautiful women here on the lands of the Gumatj peoples. But we're here at Garma, and it's lovely to see you. I saw you at Connect, and you're too busy to jump on my podcast then. So thanks so much for taking time out to jump on today. Can you share with our listeners? And now we've also got viewers, so good afternoon for people that are now watching on YouTube. So good to see us in person. I need hair and makeup, I know. Can you introduce
me now?
Can you introduce yourself? Your name, your mob. Whether you want to do a white fella introduction or your black fella introduction, I'm going to hand over to you.
Oh, look, thank you so much for having me on your podcast and on your YouTube channel. I'm Dan Borscher. I'm an ABC presenter. I want to begin by paying respect to the lands of the Yolngu people that we're on now, and I'm so grateful for the generosity in sharing stories and in bringing us into their story and sharing that with all of us. But I also want to acknowledge the place where I grew up, and that's Tennant Creek, and in particularly the Warramungu elders, who were so equally generous there in sharing their spirit, their culture, their identity. And that's something that I've experienced throughout my life and career on Larrakia lands in Darwin, now on Ngunnawal lands in Canberra. And the reason that I wanted to frame that is because my mum's family come from the coast of Victoria, from Warrnambool in fact. But because of the situation in Australia, so much of our family story has been severed. So I don't ever feel like I can fully answer that very simplest of questions that you ask about where are you from. It feels like it's a puzzle that's missing the pieces, and there are big gaps in my understanding of who I am. But I also want to say just now, I want to acknowledge the really sad passing of Uncle Archie Roach overnight, the Gunditj Mara and Bunjalang senior elder, who invited all Australians to be part of a really difficult, tough conversation about the impacts of the stolen generation and the intergenerational trauma that caused. And I felt particularly touched because that's the area where my mum grew up on. That's where we know as home as well. So I felt a great affinity and a great sense of personal sadness, but kind of national sadness today.
As soon as you mentioned Warrnambool, and I read the media release and he passed in the Warrnambool hospital, it was really hard actually just to wake up this morning and kind of not forget about hearing his passing last night, but to actually wake up today and draw strength from his passing, that he's lived and he shared his story. He's touched a lot of people's lives. He was like my dad's brother. I had the privilege of growing up with him in our house, singing his music with Annie Ruby. So I had to draw strength from all of the beautiful moments through my dad and their relationship. And even I lost my dad. Today I actually thought, I used to change earrings, and today I thought I'm going to keep these earrings on. And I know Laura Thompson, my sister from the Koori Circle, if you're watching or listening, I know that you're rainbow serpent earrings, but I claim these as my carpet snake earrings. That's my father's totem, and it just gives me strength every day. My dad used to be behind the microphone. He was a pioneer in Indigenous media, not just in Australia, but around the world. And I was quite lucky and, like I said, privileged to grow up with people like Kev Carmody. And I say Uncle Kev, Uncle Archie Roach, Warrumpy Ben, no fixed address, mixed relations. I can go on and on about people that I've had the privilege, the Yothi Indie Band, Uncle Mundawoy, they were in my house singing, jamming to the early hours. Being in radio also gave me an opportunity to go out and talk to people, and here I am now. I've got a podcast. I'm now literally doing what my dad did. He was behind the microphone right up until like literally a couple of months before he passed. And I never in a million years thought that I would literally do, a talk show or a podcast and then get to talk to people like you and then hear your story. But being here at Garma, one of the most significant moments for you, what has that been?
I think it's all of the things that you've just mentioned. It's about having big conversations about things that are difficult and challenging, but in a way that brings people together. And I would like to think that that's part of what my role is in the media, that it's about having tough discussions that are respectful. And all of the areas that you just touched on, I think, tie into that. The fact that you're this deadly young Indigenous woman who has created your own business out of seeing a need, that you're running a podcast and vodcast, having a look at stories and aspects of stories that perhaps haven't or aren't being told, and capturing that in a way that is about preserving different First Nations stories, but it's also about inviting all Australians in to listen and to hear and to hear those deep voices. That is something that is now becoming a national discussion. And I guess to go full circle back around to what's really stood out for me, it's about having those conversations and reconnecting with people that you might not have seen for a long time, or people that you might have grown up with or have known in different parts of your life, but also about making new friends and building those relationships. And I feel like, Mandinara, that's exactly what I've done with you, in that I've had the opportunity to talk to you on air and talk to you around the campfire and sitting over a cup of tea and yarning up with lots of different people, and have learnt so much more about you than I would have been able to read in a bio, but I've got a sense of who you are. And for me, it's that when we understand each other, we can have better conversations, can't we? And
that's what's missing. We just need to start back with the relationship.
Absolutely.
Go back to basics.
Absolutely.
And we'll get there.
And because once we have a relationship, you and I are not going to agree on everything. But if we've got a relationship of respect, then we can say, do you know what, we actually just don't agree on this, but let's move on.
It's all good.
But because we disagree doesn't mean that we have to dislike each other or hate each other. And I do worry that that's one of the missing pieces in the big national conversations right now. You are either this or that. You're left or right. You're right, you're wrong. It is so black and white, but actually it's all the shades of grey and the nuance in the middle that we miss when we only have those conversations.
Oh, look, that is the best way to wrap up our deadly yarn. And I keep saying to people when they stop by, and it's only 5 minutes, we need our own episode, like a whole hour, to just sit and talk and yarn about everything. So can I just say thank you before I lose this light? All about the lighting here, natural light.
That's it.
Thanks for stopping by and just giving me 5 minutes of your time. So go and enjoy the rest of the festival.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for creating this space to have these conversations, and I look forward to that hour, maybe as a starting point. I reckon we've got a couple more hours to yarn than that.
Too deadly. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Bitterness, no, not one trace. And ask your children to pick some earth up in their hands, and they will understand.
Well, it's absolutely, I would say, a pleasure after hearing you speak at the Key Forum and then meeting you and introducing myself and now having you join me on the Black Magic Woman podcast here on the Gummidge People's Traditional Lands at the Garma Festival. Gabby, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, what I want to do really quickly is, can you introduce yourself, tell people your name, if you want to do your black fella one or white fella one, but also just talk about what brings you to Garma Festival.
Yeah, so I'm Gabby. I'm a proud Wonkamara and Barkindji woman. So I grew up on Wiradjuri country in Narromine. And I'm here at Garma as an alumni of the Australian Indigenous Education Foundation. So I was lucky enough to get a scholarship and go away to boarding school. Really successful program. I had great success with it, and now I'm back as an alumni, to experience all the joy and the wonder that is Garma.
Of course, and I've seen a few of you mob around, and I know that there's another lad that joined you up on the panel, so I can't wait to speak to Wyatt as well. Oh, I was just thinking, in terms of being a younger Aboriginal woman, is this your first time at Garma?
Yeah, it is.
And what is I don't know if you could sum it up And I don't know if you can even tell me what your highlights, but what have you enjoyed so far?
I think I've just enjoyed like the open arms of the people up here, of the Yolngu people up here, who are just welcoming us to their land and, you know, sharing the spirit and their knowledge and their wisdom. I think, you know, it's incredible when we get to share our culture because we are so diverse across Australia. And, you know, to even just be up here on the beautiful land, like we went to the watering hole this morning, it was really, I feel like I'm thousands of miles away from any stress or worry at all.
It does feel like that when you're here. It's like there's no time.
Yeah.
You lose track of the day. You just kind of walk around, you're meeting different people. Is there anyone in particular that you've met, that you wanted to meet, that you met here at Garma?
You, obviously.
Oh, thank you.
I think it was really good getting to briefly meet Stan Grant,
Yes.
you know, and all the amazing work that he's doing with Q&A. I also got to meet Warren Mundine, who's also on our AIF trip, who has this incredible experience in Parliament and, you know, working across government. So it's been really great. There's so many people with a lot of wisdom and a lot of knowledge here.
Well, my dad was Warren Mundine's best man at his wedding. True story.
It's such a small world.
I know, we were yarning one day and he's telling me the story. But in terms of your takeaways, what are you going to take home with you?
I think I'm going to take home, you know, a lot of the sort of principles that you learn up here on country of just, you know, being present in the moment, you know, connecting with other people. I think we forget that when we live in the city and it's this massive rat race. And I think also too to just constantly push myself and to learn more about all the diverse, you know, Aboriginal communities across this country.
Well, look, I'm going to wrap it up here so I can do a few more before this light leaves us. But I would love to have you back and have your own episode, because I know that you've got a whole story. I heard your story, and I know you didn't even have much time to share your story when you were on stage. So I'd love to invite you back so we can actually share your amazing journey and inspire more of our young people to go and achieve whatever it is that they want to achieve. And your journey in particular, I remembered it and I can't wait. So I'm not going to tell you all about Gabby. She's going to tell her story in her own words as well. So hopefully soon I can get you back on the podcast.
110%.
To Delicis. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. Well, finally, great to meet you in person after so many Zooms. And I've said this to so many people, but it's so good to actually go hi and even give a hug. I'd say we're family. We've done work for so long now that I consider ANZ Bank Mob as part of my family, and I've just given it up. That's who you work for. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself. So can you share with our listeners, what's your name? What do you do? And obviously you're here with ANZ Bank.
Hey, and that's so nice to see you as well. I think it's like the way of the last 2 years, right? And meeting people over Zoom and doing so much work together, and so special to actually meet in person and connect physically. So obviously I'm with ANZ, you've given that away. I'm the chair of our Reconciliation Network, so it's an employee reference group that consists of about 10 to 12 employees across our organisation from all different roles. The aim of which is to align with our bank's purpose, which is to shape a world where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and non-Indigenous employees thrive on a journey towards reconciliation. So with that role, I'm also on the steering committee of our Reconciliation Action Plan, which we've just launched our fourth RAP. So aligned on our deliverables there. Purpose of our network is to sort of encourage conversations across the bank from all levels, including leadership. So very well connected
That's
across
a big job.
It is a big job. We've got some fantastic, executive leaders and executive sponsors across the organisation that do amazing work with us too. So the whole premise is to encourage conversation and to really grow that journey of reconciliation for all across both the organisation that we work for, but also the communities in which we operate.
Exactly,
which is,
as I say, there's
huge
internal
reach.
and external stakeholders that hopefully you're leaving an impact both in the workplace and then in the community as well.
That's the plan.
But in terms of what's your name?
Oh, that would help. So I'm Glenn Turdham, chair of Reconciliation
I love
for ANZ.
I love it.
Left that key bit out.
Keep it up, that's so good. Now we know who you are.
so
People
great
can
to
Google
be
you
here.
or connect with you on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
Especially if you're in the rap space, and there's a lot of organisations that listen to Black Magic Woman, which is pretty deadly. And if you haven't listened before, well, thank you so much for, supporting the opportunity for me to share stories, not just from First Nations peoples, but from anyone that's doing or creating positive change in this country, whether in their organisations or in their community. So we're here at Garma, and it's amazing to see all these different peoples from different organisations, from universities, but even meeting the Gumich people, the local mob here. What has it been, what has it been like in terms of, I'm assuming, is this your first time?
It is my first time, and it's so amazing to be here, obviously travelling up from Melbourne. And I'm looking out now to, the most beautiful, dense bush, and then you can see the ocean on the other end. Being surrounded by the people here is just the most incredible sort of rich experience. It's very hard to articulate. The oldest living culture known on the planet. So absolutely incredible. The experiences that we have here, once in a lifetime sort of opportunity, being able to hear Anthony Albanese PM yesterday speak and provide that sort of hope for the people and for, our nation's pretty incredible moment in history.
Well, I was just going to say, and that's the word hope.
Yes.
Well, we've been holding on to that word for about 250 years. So it was a moment where I kind of, I'm hopeful, and I also feel quite optimistic that for the first time, I really do believe that this Prime Minister is actually going to, not just talk the talk, but actually walk the walk. So
totally
we'll see. It was really good. I heard the statement, and it actually did bring tears to my eyes. So it actually touched me in a way that I don't think any Prime Minister or even a politician has made me feel, other than our Aboriginal politicians. When I hear them speak in Parliament, I can kind of feel our old people, that's giving them strength to be there as a minority and to kind of stand alone in a place that's so, to us, it's kind of, I don't know, it looks like a really isolating space in terms of being in politics. I definitely, all credit and hats off to our black politicians that are doing it tough and representing not just us as First Nations peoples, but they're representing their parties, they're representing, the community and also the population. You mentioned Albanese's speech. In terms of the referendum, and I'm pretty sure you're doing a lot of work as the chair of the RAP committee at ANZ Bank. What's the conversations, or what kind of conversations are you going to take back now into the workplace after this festival?
I think there's a huge component around education. I still think there's a lot of sort of education and conversation to be done for people that aren't aware of what this means and aren't aware of sort of the broader work that needs to be done now. And it was great to hear him say, it's now time to get this done. So it does provide that sort of next step from hope to actually turning this into action.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of work we can do around educating our people around what this actually means.
And I'm going to say this, yesterday I was sitting there having lunch with a politician when he said that he was, Albanese, the PM was my boss. And I was like, I thought he might have been like the chief of staff, because I've never really seen him before. I'm not really into politics. I'm into black politics. I understand a lot about black politics. I come from a politically active family. If you can read my shirt, it says Blacktivism. And my dad, in terms of that fist, I've got a lot of photos of my dad with the fist in the hand. So this shirt means a lot to me. But in terms of the lad that I was having lunch with yesterday, he was the Attorney General of Australia, sitting there having lunch next to me. And we were talking about, I literally said, I work with ANZ Bank, I work with AGL, DHL. And he said, we're good, because if we're going to get this over the line, we need corporate Australia to back this. And I said, well, I've been doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And I also said that with ABC, I said that I really do believe that corporate Australia is actually behind the Uluru Statement from the Heart. I think what's missing is we need to get more of our mob of First Nations peoples educated and kind of, on board and supporting the Uluru Statement from the Heart. So there's opportunities for you to have those conversations, and there's resources that you can lead people to in your organisation, but you nailed it. Education is the most important thing. If you don't understand the history of this country, then it's literally impossible to achieve reconciliation on a personal level or on a societal level. So like I said, you got a big job as the chair of the RAP committee. And I absolutely appreciate everything that you're doing in the workplace, because it makes it a lot easier for my company, Blackcard, to engage with a lot of your employees. So thanks, Glenn.
Awesome. Thank you.
And if there's one thing, if you could say to anyone that's listening, if they've never heard of Garma before, what would your message be to them?
Just jump online and Google it. Follow the Garma Instagram account. learn, read.
It's the Yothu Yindi Foundation as well. So we've got to make sure that people know Garma Festival is literally part of the Yothu Yindi Foundation. Alrighty. So thanks so much for jumping on.
Thank you. Thanks
You're
for having
welcome.
me.
Join us next week for part 3 of the Garma special.
Don't forget to follow Black Magic Woman podcast on all social media platforms. To keep up to date with the latest episodes and news, head to blackmagicwoman.com.au. You can rate and review the podcast on iTunes, and please feel free to share the podcast with your family and friends.